Hello and welcome to another video review with me, JMVal404, and I'm basically just going to answer the question that I was asked the other day. Now, today's question is exactly, what would you recommend with my computer? I want to overclock it and I'd like to also underclock it at different times. Can I actually do this? Well, this depends on your computer. If you've built this computer yourself, the general chances are you can do this. Now, there are, in Intel situation and AMD, there are certain CPUs that you can overclock differently. Now, with AMD it's called a Black Edition, and with Intel it's known as the Extreme Edition. Now, when you've got an Extreme Edition or a Black Edition, what's known as the core multiplier is unlocked, which allows you to change the multiplier a lot more than when it's locked. So for instance, a Core 2 Quad has a locked multiplier, but a Core 2 Extreme has an unlocked multiplier. This means that you can change the multiplier far higher than you can with a locked one. For instance, I can only change the multiplier of mine between 6 and 8 because it's a Core 2 Quad, whereas someone with an Extreme can change it a lot higher. Now, the formula for calculating your frequency is the multiplier times the base speed. Now the base speed is a front side bus divided by 4 if it's a quad pumped front side bus. So for instance, a Core 2 Quad, Core 2 Duo, they all have a quad pumped bus, so your base speed will be the front side bus divided by 4. So if your FSB is 1000 MHz, 1 GHz, then your base speed will be 250 MHz. Now you would times that by your multiplier to get your frequency. So if your multiplier is 8, that is going to be 2 GHz on your clock speed. If you increase the multiplier to 10, it will be 2.5 GHz, because 10 times 250 is 2.5 GHz, or 2500 MHz. When you're underclocking, you will want to reduce the multiplier. Now, with Extreme Editions, you can also reduce the base speed or increase the base speed, but in this situation you can reduce it. Now, if you reduce the base speed, that will obviously bring down the clock speed. Why would you want to underclock though? That is the question. Well, underclocking increases the useful life of your components, so your CPU will last longer. Also reduce the heat and the power consumption. So there are three main reasons why you would want to underclock. There is another option to underclocking. You can undervolt. Undervolting means reducing the voltage on the CPU. It reduces stability and it can cause the computer to blue screen, but if it's done correctly, it can actually reduce the power quite sufficiently. Now, undervolting I would recommend as opposed to underclocking as far as you can. I tend to leave my voltage as it is, but that's because I don't use my computer for much more than programming, so the frequency doesn't have to be that high. Now, with those who have got Extreme Editions, you're not exactly likely to be wanting to reduce your base speed. You bought that CPU so you can probably put it high up, clock it as high as you want. Now, why do you want to overclock? Well, overclocking, the main reason you'd want to overclock is so you can increase the length of time you can keep this CPU active, if you see what I mean. So, new games come out, they require more in the CPU. So you can keep this CPU for as long as possible by overclocking it, so you can keep new games, new software and everything running on your computer without having to go out and buy a new CPU. Now, overclocking does reduce the useful life of the components, so you might only get 2-3 years out of a CPU that could have lasted you 10, or if you underclocked it, maybe even longer. So I wouldn't recommend overclocking because it also requires a higher speed fan, or the fan to go faster, and it increase the power consumption of your computer, and in turn the heat generated by your computer. So underclocking I would recommend for those who don't do so much on the computer. Overclocking I'd recommend for those who want to play intense games, who are doing intense calculations etc. on their computer. But I would certainly stick to your normal speed that you've got on your computer, because it's the most stable of the lot. That's what your CPU is designed for. Finally, what would I choose to go with, underclocking or overclocking in preference? Well, that's a strange question, but I tend to underclock my computers as opposed to overclock because I'm not really into gaming and all that. I do some programming, etc. on my computer, so I can get lower power consumption on my computer and at the same time lower heat, but I can still run the programs and software that I'd intend to run on my computer, such as Visual Basic. Thanks for watching this video, and comment please, and rate, and keep the questions coming. Thanks.